My phone buzzed with a picture message from my sister, Sarah. It was a selfie of her and my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, grinning in front of a sparkling turquoise ocean. The caption read, "Having a blast in Maui. Wish you were here." Little did I know, that picture was the last time I'd see either of them for a very long time. My name is Avery, and life, for the most part, had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I'm a project manager at a tech company in Seattle, a job that keeps me busy but fulfilled. My world revolves around my bright and bubbly 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Being a single mom isn't always easy, but Lily's infectious laughter and endless curiosity make every day an adventure. My younger sister, Sarah, has always been the more spontaneous one in the family. Where I'm meticulous and plan everything, Sarah is impulsive and lives in the moment. Sometimes her free spirit is refreshing, but other times it can be a source of worry for me. Sarah works as a freelance photographer and often travels for assignments, which is why I was initially thrilled when she offered to take Lily on a week-long vacation to Maui during Lily's summer break. "Come on, Avery, it'll be great," Sarah had exclaimed over the phone, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Lily loves the beach, and I have a photography gig lined up there anyway. We can stay in this adorable little condo right on the water. It'll be our little girl's getaway." I hesitated. Leaving Lily, even with family, always tugged at my heart. But Lily had been ecstatic at the idea of spending a week with her Aunt Sarah in Hawaii, building sandcastles and swimming in the ocean. And honestly, a week of peace and quiet sounded incredibly appealing. My work had been particularly demanding lately, and the thought of catching up on sleep and finally finishing that book on my nightstand was tempting. "Okay," I finally agreed, a small knot of apprehension still lingering in my stomach. "But you have to promise to call me every day and send me lots of pictures." Sarah readily agreed, promising to keep me updated. The week leading up to their trip was a flurry of packing, sunscreen shopping, and excited chatter from Lily. I made sure Sarah had all of Lily's medications, her favorite stuffed animal, and a detailed itinerary of her allergies and any quirks she might have. Sarah, ever the carefree spirit, just waved my concerns away with a breezy, "Relax, Avery, we'll be fine." The day they left, I drove them to the airport, trying to mask the sadness I felt as I watched Lily wave goodbye at the security checkpoint. I told myself it was just a week, a chance for Lily to have some fun and for me to recharge. The first few days went exactly as planned. Sarah sent me photos of Lily building elaborate sandcastles, splashing in the waves, and even trying to hula dance at a local luau. They called me every evening, Lily's voice filled with tales of her adventures. "Aunt Sarah bought me a pineapple-shaped ice cream, Mommy, and we saw a real sea turtle," she'd squeal, her joy palpable through the phone. By the 4th day, however, the calls became less frequent. Sarah would text me updates instead, saying they were having too much fun to stop for a long call. I tried calling a few times, but she didn't answer, texting back later with a vague excuse about being out exploring. A tiny seed of unease began to sprout in my mind. Sarah, despite her spontaneity, was usually pretty good about keeping in touch, especially when Lily was with her. On the 5th day, I didn't hear from them at all. No texts, no calls. I tried calling Sarah repeatedly, but her phone just rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail. My anxiety started to climb. I told myself not to panic, that maybe they were in an area with no cell service, or perhaps Sarah's phone had died. But a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach told me something was wrong. The 6th day was agonizing. Still no word. I called the condo where they were supposed to be staying, but the rental company informed me that the booking was under Sarah's name and they couldn't give me any information. I felt a cold dread wash over me. This wasn't like Sarah. Even if she was having a blast, she wouldn't just disappear without a word. Not when she had my daughter with her. By the evening of the 6th day, I was a mess. I hadn't slept properly in 2 nights, and my mind was racing with terrifying possibilities. Had something happened to them? Was there an accident? Had Sarah gotten into some kind of trouble? I called our parents, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. They tried to reassure me, saying Sarah probably just got caught up in something, but I could hear the worry in their voices too. "I'm booking a flight to Maui first thing in the morning," I told them, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at me. "I have to go there. I can't just sit here and wait." My parents agreed, offering to come with me. The next morning, I found myself on a plane to Maui, the beautiful scenery outside the window doing nothing to calm the storm of anxiety raging inside me. My heart pounded in my chest with each passing mile. Where were Sarah and Lily? What had happened? The moment we landed, I felt a surge of desperate energy. I went straight to the police station and filed a missing person report. The officer on duty listened to my story, his expression sympathetic but cautious. He explained that it was still early, and sometimes people just went off the grid on vacation. But I insisted that this was completely out of character for my sister, especially with a child in her care. My parents and I spent the rest of the day retracing Sarah's steps, going to the condo, the beaches she had mentioned, even the luau where they had supposedly gone. But there was no sign of them. The condo was empty, the key left on the counter. The neighbors hadn't seen them in a couple of days. The employees at the luau remembered seeing Sarah and a little girl earlier in the week, but not recently. As night fell, a heavy blanket of despair settled over me. The beautiful island paradise now felt menacing and cold. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. Where could they be? The next morning, the police started a more formal investigation. They checked Sarah's bank accounts and credit card activity, but there had been no transactions since a couple of days into the trip. They contacted the airline, but there was no record of Sarah or Lily having booked a return flight. That's when the first real shock hit me. The police informed me that Sarah's photography gig in Maui? It didn't exist. They had contacted the person Sarah had supposedly been working for, and they had no knowledge of any such arrangement. My blood ran cold. Why would Sarah lie about that? What was she really doing in Maui? And where was my daughter? The carefree vacation I had envisioned had turned into a terrifying mystery. The knot of apprehension I had felt before they left tightened into a painful, suffocating grip. I knew in my heart that this was more than just Sarah being irresponsible. Something was deeply wrong. The police continued their investigation, checking hospitals and contacting local authorities. My parents and I plastered missing person flyers all over the island, our hope dwindling with each passing hour. I tried to stay strong for Lily's sake, but the fear was relentless. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, praying it would be news, but it was always just another dead end. Days turned into a week, and then another. The initial flurry of police activity began to slow down, replaced by a frustrating lack of leads. My parents returned home, needing to get back to their own lives, but I couldn't leave. I stayed in Maui, haunted by the last picture Sarah had sent, Lily's innocent smile now a painful reminder of what I had lost. One evening, as I sat alone in the empty condo, staring out at the endless ocean, a thought struck me. Sarah had always been active on social media, posting photos of her travels and her life. I had checked her accounts before, but there was nothing since that first picture from Maui. But what about other platforms? I remembered Sarah had a travel blog that she occasionally updated. I hadn't looked at it in years. With trembling fingers, I pulled up the blog on my laptop. The last post was from just before the trip to Maui, a cheerful announcement about their upcoming adventure. I scrolled through the comments, hoping to find some clue, some mention of where they might have gone, and then I saw it. A comment posted a few days after they arrived in Maui, from a user I didn't recognize. It was a simple question. Are you still planning to visit Hana? Hana. The road to Hana. It was a famous scenic drive on the eastern side of the island, known for its stunning waterfalls, lush rainforests, and secluded beaches. Sarah had mentioned wanting to go there. Could they have gone there and something happened? A renewed sense of urgency filled me. I contacted the police again, telling them about the blog comment. They agreed to look into it, but they cautioned me that it was a long shot. Hana was a vast and often remote area. Despite their warning, I decided to go to Hana myself. I rented a car and drove the winding road, my eyes scanning every inch of the landscape. The beauty of the scenery was breathtaking, but I couldn't appreciate it. My mind was consumed by worry, by the desperate need to find my daughter. I stopped at every small town and shop along the way, showing Lily's picture, asking if anyone had seen them. Most people hadn't. But at a small fruit stand, an elderly woman's eyes widened when she saw Lily's photo. "Yes, I saw this little girl," she said, her voice hesitant. "She was with a woman. They stopped here about a week ago. The woman seemed a little agitated. She kept looking over her shoulder. My heart pounded in my chest. Agitated? Looking over her shoulder? What did that mean? "Did they say where they were going?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman shook her head. "They just bought some fruit and then drove off towards the black sand beach." The black sand beach. It was a popular spot in Hana. I thanked the woman and rushed back to my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The black sand beach was my only lead, and I clung to it with desperate hope. As I drove, the road became narrower and more winding, the vegetation growing thicker and more dense. Cell service became spotty, and I felt increasingly isolated. But I pressed on, driven by the thought of Lily. Finally, I reached the black sand beach. It was a secluded cove, the sand a stark contrast to the lush green cliffs that surrounded it. There were a few tourists scattered around, but no sign of Sarah or Lily. I walked along the beach, my eyes scanning the area, calling out Lily's name. The only sound was the crashing of the waves against the shore. Despair began to creep in again. Had I come all this way for nothing? Just as I was about to give up, I noticed something tucked away behind a large rock formation at the far end of the beach. It was a small, brightly colored hair clip, one of Lily's favorites, a little butterfly with glittery wings. My breath caught in my throat. They had been here, but where were they now? I looked around frantically, my eyes searching for any other sign. And then I saw it. A faint set of footprints leading away from the beach, towards a dense thicket of trees. The footprints were small, definitely a child's, and next to them were larger footprints, likely an adult's. Hope surged through me, stronger than the fear. They had walked into the trees. But where were they going? And why? Without hesitation, I followed the footprints, pushing my way through the dense undergrowth. The trees were thick, blocking out most of the sunlight, and the air was heavy with humidity. The footprints were becoming fainter, but I could still make them out. After what felt like an eternity, the trees began to thin out, and I emerged into a small clearing. And there, in the middle of the clearing, was a dilapidated old shack. It looked abandoned, the windows boarded up, the paint peeling. A wave of apprehension washed over me. What were Sarah and Lily doing here? Why would they come to this isolated place? I approached the shack cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. I called out Sarah's name, then Lily's. But there was no answer. The silence was unsettling. With trembling hands, I tried the door. It was unlocked. I hesitated for a moment, a sense of foreboding washing over me. But the thought of Lily pushed me forward. I had to know. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was musty and stale, and the room was dimly lit by a few cracks in the boarded-up windows. Dust motes danced in the faint light. And then I saw them. Lily was sitting on a small, worn-out cot in the corner of the room, her eyes wide with fear. And standing over her was Sarah, her face pale and drawn, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me weak. "Lily!" I cried, rushing towards her. "Mommy!" Lily screamed, launching herself into my arms. I held her tight, burying my face in her hair, tears streaming down my face. She was safe. She was okay. But as I looked up at Sarah, I saw that her face was still filled with fear, and something else. Guilt? "Sarah, what's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are you here? Why didn't you call me?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes welling up with tears. "Avery, I messed up," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I got into some trouble. What kind of trouble? I pressed, my relief quickly turning back to worry. Sarah took a deep breath, and the story that poured out of her was more shocking and unbelievable than anything I could have ever imagined. This carefree vacation had taken a dark and dangerous turn, and my sister had dragged my innocent daughter right into the middle of it. It started before we even left for Maui, Sarah confessed, her voice choked with tears. I borrowed some money, a lot of money, from the wrong people. My mind reeled. Sarah had always been a bit financially irresponsible, prone to impulse buys and occasional overspending, but borrowing a lot of money from the wrong people sounded ominous. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" I asked, my voice sharp with fear. I looked at Lily, who was clinging to me, her small face etched with worry. I tried to shield her from the intensity of our conversation, pulling her closer. Sarah wrung her hands, her gaze fixed on the dusty floor. I got involved in some online trading. It seemed like a quick way to make some extra cash. But I lost everything. And then some. And these wrong people? Who are they? I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. They're not the kind of people you say no to, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. They gave me a loan, a really high-interest one, and when I couldn't pay it back, they started threatening me. Threatening you? Sarah, why didn't you tell me? I exclaimed, my voice rising in disbelief and anger. I was so ashamed, she sobbed. I didn't want you to know what a mess I'd made. I thought I could figure it out, maybe win some money back. But it just got worse. So, the photography gig in Maui, I started, already knowing the answer. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. It was a lie. I didn't have any work here. I thought if I disappeared for a while, maybe they'd forget about me. I was desperate, Avery. I panicked. And you brought Lily into this? I asked, my voice shaking with fury. You put my daughter in danger? Sarah flinched as if I had slapped her. No, never. I would never intentionally put Lily in harm's way. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if we were together, we'd be safer. I know it sounds crazy. Crazy didn't even begin to cover it. My sister had taken my daughter on a fake vacation, lied to me, and now we were hiding in a dilapidated shack in the middle of nowhere because she owed money to dangerous people. How did they find you? I asked, my mind racing. I don't know, Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear again. I think maybe they tracked my phone. That's why I turned it off a few days ago. Just then, a loud banging on the door made us all jump. The flimsy wooden door rattled in its frame. Sarah Thompson? A gruff voice called out from the other side. We know you're in there. Come out now. Sarah's face turned ashen. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight. They found us, she whispered, her voice filled with terror. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Lily, who was now whimpering in my arms, her eyes wide with fear. I had to protect her. Stay behind me, I told Lily, trying to sound braver than I felt. I stood up, placing myself between her and the door. What do we do? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. We're not going anywhere with them, I said firmly. There has to be another way out. I quickly scanned the small shack. There was only one door and a couple of boarded-up windows. Escape seemed impossible. The banging on the door grew louder, more insistent. Last chance, Sarah! Open the door or we're coming in! Panic surged through me. I had to think fast. My eyes landed on a small, dark opening in the back wall near the floor. It looked like it might lead to a crawl space under the shack. Sarah, can you fit through there? I asked, pointing to the opening. Sarah looked at it doubtfully. I don't know. It looks small. We don't have a choice, I said urgently. You go first. Lily and I will follow. The banging on the door intensified, followed by the sound of splintering wood. They were breaking in. Sarah didn't hesitate. She dropped to her hands and knees and squeezed through the small opening. It was a tight fit, but she managed to disappear into the darkness. Okay, Lily, it's our turn, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Lily was scared, but she nodded bravely. I went through the opening first, then reached back to help Lily squeeze through. We found ourselves in a dark, cramped crawl space under the shack. The air was thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. We could hear the sounds of the door being kicked open above us. "Stay quiet," I whispered to Lily, holding her close. We huddled together in the darkness, listening to the heavy footsteps and angry voices echoing above us. "They're gone!" one of the voices yelled. "Where did they go?" "Search the place!" another voice barked. We held our breath, praying they wouldn't find us. The floorboards above us creaked as they moved around the shack. We could hear them rummaging through Sarah's belongings, their voices growing increasingly frustrated. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps above us moved away from our section of the crawl space. We waited, listening intently. Finally, after several tense minutes of silence, I cautiously poked my head up through the opening. The shack was empty. "Okay, let's go," I whispered to Sarah and Lily. We carefully crawled out of the crawl space and into the main room. "Where do we go now?" Sarah asked, her voice still trembling. "We need to get to the police," I said firmly. "This has gone too far." We carefully made our way out of the shack and back through the trees, emerging onto the black sand beach. I pulled out my phone. Miraculously, I had a weak signal. I quickly dialed 911. It took the police a while to reach our remote location, but finally, we saw the flashing lights of their vehicles approaching. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as we were taken into their custody. At the police station, Sarah confessed everything. She told them about the loan, the threats, and her desperate attempt to hide in Maui. The police took her statement and assured us they would investigate. Lily and I were taken to a safe place, a hotel near the police station. I held Lily close that night, unable to shake the image of her scared little face in that dark shack. I was furious with Sarah for putting us in such a dangerous situation, but I was also relieved that we were safe. The next few days were a blur of police interviews and phone calls with my parents back home. Sarah was taken into custody while the police investigated the threats against her. I focused on Lily, trying to reassure her that everything was going to be okay. Eventually, the police were able to track down the people Sarah owed money to. They were indeed dangerous individuals involved in illegal activities. The police launched a full investigation, and Sarah agreed to cooperate with them in exchange for a reduced sentence. It took several weeks for everything to be sorted out. Sarah faced legal consequences for her actions, and our relationship was strained, to say the least. I was angry and hurt by her recklessness, by the lies and the fear she had put Lily and me through. Lily and I eventually returned home to Seattle. Life slowly started to return to normal, but the experience had left its mark. Lily was more clingy than before, and I found myself constantly worried about her safety. As for Sarah, she eventually got out of jail and started the long process of rebuilding her life. She reached out to me, full of remorse and apologies. It took a long time and a lot of difficult conversations, but eventually I started to forgive her. What she had done was wrong, incredibly irresponsible, but she was still my sister, and I knew she hadn't intentionally meant to harm Lily. Our relationship is different now. There's a distance, a lack of trust that will likely always be there, but we're working on it, slowly, cautiously. Looking back, that vacation to Maui was supposed to be a fun getaway, a chance for Lily to make memories with her aunt. Instead, it turned into a terrifying ordeal that none of us will ever forget. It taught me a harsh lesson about trust and the importance of knowing who you're really dealing with. And it reminded me of the fierce love I have for my daughter, a love that would drive me to the ends of the earth to protect her.